Hello and welcome to today's episode, in which we have a go at making a delicious and easy to make beer and cheddar bread. Anyone that's familiar to the channel, you'll have seen my little recipe ideas note that I keep on Google Keep. So anytime I have an idea or I see something that sounds delicious, stick it on there. And then I've got something in reserve for when my creativity's not at its peak. Last night I was thinking I need to film something this week, but I haven't got a clue what to make. So I thought I'll have a look at the list and saw the recipe for beer bread that I've had on this, must be at least 2 years, something like that. But the recipe we're going to use is from thechunkychef.com. I'll link to the original down in the description for you. I've decided I'll also make a gluten-free version, because then people who are celiac, gluten-free, or just avoiding gluten for whatever reason, they've got an option as well. The recipe is a kind of soda bread that uses baking soda instead of yeast, so you don't need to let it rise and all that faffing around, so it's a super quick thing to make. The instructions on the recipe keep saying batter. Normally when you make bread, you make a dough, which is a thick, heavy thing, so I've no idea what to expect with this. I've got my oven preheating at 160°C, which is about 320 Fahrenheit. The original says to preheat to 350, which is 180. Mine's a fan-assisted oven, so you always need to go 20 degrees lower. I googled, are most American ovens fan assisted? And the answer seems to be no. I'm gonna hedge my bets and go at the lower temperature, because I don't want the top to get too much color on it before the inside is baked, because it's easier to go longer than it is, you know, rescuing burnt bread. I'm gonna make both of the breads in tandem at the same time. My thinking for this is, because I'm using baking powder and beer, if I make one and then leave it stand while I make the other one, it might impact the kind of efficacy of the baking powder. It might not give as much lift. I don't know. If you know, feel free to let me know in a comment. I always welcome valid advice. The original recipe is in cups, so I'm going to convert things as we go on the scale so I can tell you exactly. The calculators online, they vary so wildly. I haven't got enough regular plain flour, so I'm going to have to use self-raising. When you're doing things in cups, it's better to transfer it into the cup, because then you don't get as much compression, because that's when you start getting very different results. I'll link to the kind of weights and measures that I did. So that's 150 grams. Now, looking at an online calculator, I think normally it comes up at 120, just goes to show. 3 cups of self-raising flour. I'll do a teaspoon of white granulated sugar. The original asked for 2.5 tablespoons. That's a lot of sugar in bread, but I'm going to put a little bit in just to kind of balance out the bitterness from the beer. The original wants a teaspoon of salt. I'm having a moment of decision paralysis. I don't know if that's too much salt for me, because the cheese is also salty. I'm going to do half a teaspoon, and then once everything's mixed together, then I'll taste it. Perhaps add another half teaspoon or a quarter or something like that. Sieve all of that through. I've had that bag of self-raising flour for quite a while, so I'm not 100% sure how potent the baking powder in there is going to be, the rising agents. I think I'll add a teaspoon in just for safety. I can see some lumps. I'm just going to try and get those out if I can. I'm going to give this a bit of a mix together. I'm going to use a dough hook just to get things combined somewhat. Then I'll push this to the side for a second while I make up the gluten-free one. The gluten-free flour blend I'm using is tapioca, rice, potato, maize and buckwheat, but feel free to try whichever blend you've got. Altogether, it's like 455 grams. Teaspoon of sugar and a half teaspoon of salt. And then this one is just a plain flour, so I'm going to add the tablespoon of baking powder. If you are baking anything gluten-free for someone who is gluten-free, celiac, etc., be sure to find yourself a gluten-free baking powder as well, because some brands use wheat flour in there. Tablespoon of baking powder. The gluten-free flour blend I've used doesn't have any kind of binder in it. Some of them have got xanthan gum in it. I looked on the company website at a few of their recipes to see what they use, and they either use egg whites or chickpea flour. Chickpea flour has got a flavour to it though. It's not necessarily unpleasant, but it's distinctive, and I don't want that to mess with the flavour of the cheese and the beer. So I'm going to have an attempt at using ground flax seeds. So that's just flax seeds that I've put in the coffee grinder, and you can make like an egg substitute for baking. You can also use chia seeds, like ground chia seeds, and you just add hot water to it and it makes like a gloopy egg type mixture. I've done it in a few different things, like I want to say the peanut butter jelly cookies, the gluten-free chocolate chip cookies, a few other things. I'll maybe stick some links in the description for you. To replace one egg, normally I want to say it's 1 teaspoon of ground seeds to 3 tablespoons of water. I think I'm going to do all of that, which is around a tablespoon. And I don't think I'm going to bother adding hot water. I think I'll just let the beer use that as the liquid. I have seen ground seeds in the supermarket, but it's dead easy just to do it in a coffee grinder or in a pestle and mortar. If you're bothered about the appearance, look for golden flax seeds. If not, use the brown ones, that's fine. We'll sieve those together. And I'll try not to get flour all over my camera again. Give that a mix. I'm going to use Cathedral City plant-based. It's the extra mature flavour. I think having the extra mature has just got more punch. If you can't necessarily find a cheddar or an extra mature cheddar, look for maybe a smoked, like the Applewood smoked ones. I think that'd be really tasty. The recipe states a cup of grated cheese. I had a look online and apparently a cup of cheddar style cheese is the equivalent of around 4 ounces, which is 113 grams. I did think about grating the cheese in the food processor, but vegan cheese tends to be a little bit crumblier than regular cheese. And I just thought maybe it'll smear, it won't grate properly, I don't know. So that's some of the cheese in. So I'm just gonna give it a mix. This is just to stop big clumps of cheese forming, because you want it evenly distributed throughout. The size of the block is 280 grams. Yeah, I'm gonna do half the block in each. I'm just gonna put cheese in the other batch. If you are making 2 batches like this, one gluten-free, one not, 100% do not cross-contaminate things the way I am. Keep everything super clean and super separate. This is not gonna go to anyone that is gluten-free, so I can use the same utensils and not worry about it. I'm gonna melt down some vegan butter. That's to put inside the tin and also on the top of the bread. I think to help get a nice bit of flavour and also some colour. I'm going to start warming this on the stove just on a very low heat. This is my own addition. I've got some toasted walnuts. I've got a massive quantity of walnuts in the freezer, nice bit of nuttiness, and add some extra texture in the bread as well. I'm just going to crush them down with my knife a little bit, just to make the pieces a bit smaller. You could use seeds as well, or any other kind of nut that you like. And as I go through, if I see any papery bits of skin that's come off, I'm going to pull that out. Toasted the nuts off in the air fryer, 4 minutes at 180 and then 4 minutes at 170. These are in the freezer though. If yours aren't frozen, you won't need to do that long. That's all of the nuts chopped. I think I'll do half in each. Mix that through. Okay, it's time for beer. These are the beers that I'm going to use. So that one's a lager, that's an IPA. I need 12 ounces, which is 340 mils. I think I'll do the IPA in the wheat one and the lager in the other one. I've lined 2 loaf tins, hoping they're not going to be too small. We'll see. It's slightly under, so I'll add a splash of the lager. Push a little well into the centre, and I'm going to pour the beer in. And then use the dough hook to slowly work it in. Yeah, so it's not really a batter. I did wonder. Just making sure to pick up all of the dry bits of flour on the side and on the bottom. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now I need to put some melted butter in the tin. I need to do 1.5 tablespoons of butter in the bottom and brush it around. It doesn't need to come up the sides, apparently. It just needs to be in the bottom. Not sure if this is completely necessary. I assume it's just for flavour. I'll get the dough in. I'm going to even this off if I can. Then do a little bit more butter on top and brush that around. So that's one already. Then I've got another 12 ounces, 340 mils of lager. We'll repeat the process in the gluten-free version. If you need to make a specifically gluten-free version, you're going to need to find a gluten-free beer. They do exist. Stella Artois do one. I'm sure Peroni does one. If you're in the UK, Brass Castle, all of their beers are certified by the Celiac Society. They make delicious beers and they are thoroughly lovely people. I'll link to their website in the description for you. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the process with the other tin. Add the mixture. You can see it's not clumping up the same way as the other one did, but that's because there's no gluten, and the gluten is what makes it very kind of elastic. So I'm hoping that if I just pack this in quite tight, hopefully that will help bind it together a little bit. More butter on, and then just in case there is any massive swelling and overspilling, I'm going to put them on a baking tray. So I'm going to bung those in the oven. Just realised I forgot to taste the batter to see if it wanted more salt. Well, I'll know for next time. The original instructions say 45 to 50 minutes-ish. I'll set my timer for 45 and I'll start sticking a skewer in it. Once it comes out the oven, I then need to make up a garlic butter topping. Here it says 2.5 tablespoons of melted butter, a teaspoon of dry parsley, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. I'll probably film it in close up, but I think I'm also going to use fresh garlic and fresh parsley because I don't have any dried parsley and I think it's going to have a nicer flavour. So I'll crush the parsley down and melt that in with the butter just to heat it up so it's not quite as potent, so it kind of cooks through a bit. And then I'll brush it on and the residual heat from the loaf will cook it off a bit more. I'll do that as soon as it comes out the oven, leave it for 5 to 10 minutes, and then I need to take the loaves out and let them cool completely. And then once everything has cooled all the way down, we'll do some eating. Our loaf is out of the oven, cooled down, ready for eating, and smelling incredible. Here is the gluten-free one. It doesn't really look like it's risen, does it? I didn't put the garlic and herb butter on the top because I might end up turning this into crackers or something like that, like slice it really thinly and then put it back in the oven to toast them off. But yeah, it's baked and it is, you know, it's holding together. So I guess we'll see what happens when I cut it open. I don't know enough about gluten-free baking to have any kind of indication of what's going on there. I'm trying to think when I've used that baking powder recently. I did it in the blondies last week, and then before that I think the coffee and walnut cake, so I'm pretty sure it's fine, it's giving lift. It's hard to say with this one because that had the self-raising flour in. I don't know. I'll update the pinned comment, you know, if I stumble across any information, knowledge, that kind of thing. I've got some small loaf tins, so I might start playing around and doing some very small little batches and try and figure things out. It might be fine once I cut it open. I doubt it, but you never know. Ooh, texture of it, the crumb looks pretty decent, pretty bread-like. In the end, I think I had it in the oven, I want to say probably 53 minutes, something like that. Took it out at 45 and the end of the skewer was still coming out with bits on it. So I put it in for another 5. And then by the time I'd messed around putting cameras and everything back on, probably a couple of minutes each time. In a fan oven, 160 is a good temperature because the amount of colour on there, it would be significantly darker had I gone 180. I've made up some Marmite butter to go with it. If you've never had Marmite before, it's a yeast extract. So it's very salty, umami. Hard to describe the flavour. Some people love it, some people hate it. I love it. I took 2 or 3 tablespoons of vegan butter, softened it. You're not melting it, you're softening it. Softened the Marmite jar in the microwave as well, and then mixed in about a tablespoon or so of the Marmite. If you somewhat like the flavour of Marmite but you find it a bit too intense, this is a really nice way of kind of cutting through that intensity. Try the bread on its own first. That's yummy. The crust on the outside's nice and crunchy, and then the bread itself is nice and tender. I don't know if I can taste the cheese, which is surprising, but there is a lot of garlic on the outside, so maybe that's kind of overwhelming it. Maybe more cheese, maybe double the amount of cheese would be worth trying. The crumb, like the texture of the bread, really nice. It's kind of, there's a lightness to it, but it's got some body. 10 minutes work, something like that, 10, 15 minutes work, and then you've got a loaf of bread in like an hour. Try it with some of the Marmite butter. I haven't had my dinner yet. And I'm kind of debating whether to just have massive slabs of that with loads of butter on it. The walnuts are really nice in there as well. They give a nice flavour, but also a nice bit of texture as you're crunching through it. The flavour of the beer, it's there as an kind of in the background as an aftertaste. It's not immediately apparent. I think all of the flavours are quite subtle, and then mingling together is just perfect. We'll cut into the gluten-free one, see what that's doing inside. Yeah, as I suspected. So there's just no rise in there at all. Give it a try for scientific purposes. Tastes pretty good. It is baked all the way through, because when I press on it, it bounces back. Whereas if it was underbaked, it would just collapse. I can't tell you what's happened there, which is a shame. I'm trying to cut a really thin slither and it's really difficult, but I'll try and do pieces hopefully thinner if I can. The trouble is that crust is really crispy, so it's kind of difficult to get precision. I'll get thin slices, arrange them flat on a baking sheet. I'll probably need to do, I don't know, 2 or 3 batches and bake them maybe 140 for for 45 minutes to an hour, something like that, just so they crisp all the way through. And I think they'll make nice crackers, so it's not, you know, it's not going to go in the bin or anything. Grabbed another slice to see if I can pinpoint the cheese and beer flavour of it. It's difficult because of the garlic. I think the garlic is the dominant flavour. They're all delicious, it tastes really, really good. But I don't know if you'd necessarily know it was cheese and beer bread. Now that I haven't got crust on the other side, I can taste the bread itself a bit more. There's definitely a beer kind of kick to it. It tastes a bit yeasty. But yeah, I think double the amount of cheese would be worth a shot. All in all though, that's incredible. When I was pulling the flours out, I did grab a bag of wholemeal flour and I thought, should I try one with that? But because I've never made it before, I didn't know what to expect. So I thought maybe using brown flour is going to change something. So I decided just to use white flour in the end. But now that I know, I'm going to do a brown version and I'll update the pinned comment, let you know how it works out, if there's any tweaks you need to make. I suspect using brown flour is going to increase the cooking time. Could be wrong, but that's what my gut instinct is saying. I might grab a dark beer when I do the brown version, because I think that'd be really nice to get like some deep, dense, intense flavours in there. Would be really tasty. It's now 8 PM and it's way too late for me to start messing around with the gluten-free one. So I'm just going to wrap everything up overnight and then tomorrow I'll have a think of how I'm going to sort this out and I'll update the pinned comment with what temperature I did and that kind of thing. It's a balance between doing it quickly but then burning the top of it before the inside is crisped up. So I suspect I'll probably have to turn each slice over after 20 minutes, half an hour or so. It's that part of the video where I give some appreciation to my people over on Patreon. It's really nice to have a community of people who also give me some cash, which helps me buy ingredients and pay for the associated costs of running a YouTube channel, because things are getting more and more expensive. If you'd like to sign up for a monthly membership, you'll get some access to bonus content and all that kind of thing, other things that I've got going on around doing food content. I'll leave the link to everything down in the description for you. If you want to learn how to make lots more plant-based recipes and make accidental crackers, like this video and subscribe to the channel, look for the bell icon and tap that. You'll get an alert as soon as I publish a new one. And then while you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.